Welcome back to The Explainer. If you're into deep dives on the data that's actively shaping our world, go ahead and hit subscribe. Today, we're looking at a massive structural shift in how software is built. We are talking about the wild transition from smart autocomplete to fully autonomous coding agents. It is a fundamental change, and it's literally rewriting the rules of technology as we know it.
All right, let's kick things off with a number that honestly just blew my mind, 41%. That is the share of all code committed by developers globally in 2026 that was either written or directly assisted by artificial intelligence. I mean, just think about that for a second. We aren't talking about 5 or 10% here. Nearly half of every single line of code shipped by software teams this year has an AI's fingerprints on it. And what's truly mind-blowing is the speed of this shift. This number was sitting practically at zero just a few short years ago in 2022.
But the human element behind that code is even more fascinating. 90% of developers are now using at least one AI tool on the job. In roughly 2 years, we've watched AI-assisted coding go from a neat little novelty, something those skeptical senior engineers might have completely dismissed, straight into the absolute default way that software gets built across the entire industry. So, let's look at Section 1, the new coding reality.
Okay, so for a while, the tools that made AI coding famous were essentially acting as hypersmart autocomplete. You'd type out half a line, and the AI would suggest the rest based on pattern matching from your recent keystrokes. It was incredibly helpful, absolutely, but it required constant line-by-line supervision. The AI didn't actually understand your project or how different files connected to each other. It was kind of like having a really eager backseat driver. But the new way? It's literally like handing over the keys to a self-driving car. You give an AI a plain English task, and it operates as an autonomous agent. It goes away, reads your entire codebase, figures out what needs to change across multiple files, and handles the whole shebang entirely on its own.
Which brings us to Section 2. What exactly is Claude Code?
The really crucial concept to grasp here is agentic coding. Built by the folks at Anthropic, Claude Code runs directly right there in your computer's terminal. But the big structural difference is that the AI isn't just assisting you as you type anymore. It is acting as an autonomous agent. It's planning, it's executing, and it's verifying complex multi-step tasks on your behalf, completely removing the need for file-by-file micromanaging. You just hand it a task and it delivers the result, period.
In the market data on this tool's adoption, it is genuinely historic. After launching in May of 2025, Claude Code's usage spiked 6 times over between April 2025 and January 2026. In less than a year, just 9 months actually, it rocketed from absolute zero to a $2.5 billion annual run rate in revenue. That officially makes it the fastest revenue growth of any developer product in history. And over on GitHub, it quickly scooped up over 101,000 stars and 15,500 forks in the blink of an eye.
And this chart right here perfectly captures why it's experiencing that kind of hypergrowth. When surveyed, developers rated Claude Code as their most loved AI coding tool by an absolute mile. 46% of developers chose Claude Code as their absolute favorite, which completely dwarfs major competitors like Cursor at 19% and GitHub Copilot way down at 9%.
So why do they love it so much? Well, it boils down to raw, unfiltered capability. Have you heard of SWE Bench Pro? It's essentially the industry's most brutal test for AI coding ability, throwing real unsolved issues from actual software repositories at these models. Just 2 years ago, hitting 50% on this test was considered totally impossible for the near future. The best models were literally scoring under 5%. But Claude Code, it hit a mind-bending 64.3%. That's the absolute highest AI coding benchmark score we've seen in 2026.
Let's dive into Section 3 to see how this works behind the scenes, how the agent operates.
It all happens in this amazing continuous loop. You start by just giving it a plain English instruction. From there, Claude uses its massive 200,000 token context window to literally ingest and understand your entire project. It basically builds a complete mental model of your software. Then it creates an internal plan, autonomously writes the code, and actually runs your tests. And get this, if a test fails, it reads the error and fixes its own mistake before it even commits the changes. You literally just sit back and watch it work.
Because of this insane level of autonomy, developers are delegating some seriously heavy-duty tasks to Claude. We're not talking about fixing typos here. They are having it build entire features from scratch just by handing it a product requirements document. They use it to trace nasty, critical production bugs deep back through the code base to find the root cause. One of the coolest use cases is refactoring massive legacy code bases. In a head-to-head multi-file React refactoring benchmark published early in 2026, Claude Code completely outpaced the competition because it actually understood the broader context, whereas competitors like GitHub Copilot struggled and actually missed files that needed updating.
All right, moving on to Section 4, Claude's Code versus the competition.
So, there are three main tools dominating the space right now. First up is GitHub Copilot, the veteran with 26 million global users, currently leading workplace adoption at 29%. Its real superpower is accessibility. It lives right inside your existing editor and is fantastic for lightweight assistance. Then we have Cursor, the IDE challenger, which is tied with Claude at 18% workplace adoption. Cursor is actually the fastest growing SaaS company ever recorded, hitting $2 billion in ARR in roughly 28 months, and it's brilliant for a daily AI-integrated visual workflow. But Claude Code is in a league of its own as the pure, terminal-based autonomous agent. It's what you use for complex features and large-scale refactoring when you need the AI to fly solo. Think of Copilot as your assistant, Cursor as your super smart workbench, and Claude as your autonomous senior engineer.
So who actually wins? Well, in the reality of the 2026 landscape, the smartest developers aren't just picking one. The real winner is the combination of Claude Code and Cursor. Devs are using Cursor for their everyday line-by-line coding inside the visual editor, and then they deploy Claude Code in the terminal for the heavy lifting, those massive project overhauls where you need something to understand the whole code base at once.
Which brings us to our final part, Section 5, the future of software.
You know, for pretty much all of computing history, the barrier to building software was insanely high. You had to learn complex syntax, weird frameworks, and basically learn how computers think. But now that you can just describe what you want in plain English to an agent that builds it for you, that barrier hasn't just been lowered, it has completely collapsed. We are now seeing entrepreneurs launch full products without hiring a single engineer. We've got data analysts building bespoke tools and designers turning mockups into fully functioning prototypes without knowing how to code. The massive gap between having a cool idea and having a working app is basically gone.
Now I know what you might be thinking. What about the jobs? Well, the data actually points in a surprisingly positive direction. AI isn't replacing developers. The overall number of developers is actually growing. Instead, it's driving a massive 31.4% average increase in productivity. The return on investment for teams using these agentic tools averages around 2.5 to 3.5 times, and up to 6 times for the really top-performing teams. It's letting smaller groups ship software at speeds we've literally never seen before, doing in just 1 hour what used to take several days. Honestly, it might mean developers finally get to log off and see the sun for a change.
The human element of coding is fundamentally shifting away from memorizing syntax and moving toward describing intent, critically reviewing what the AI spits out, and making those big, high-level architectural decisions. And that leaves us with one incredibly profound thought to chew on. In this new autonomous paradigm, is the code still the bottleneck to innovation, or is it simply the idea? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer to unpack this wild shift in technology. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next one.